So if we've been seeing in Kings already, you're going to move from the north to the south and back up to the north, back down to the south. It's the only way you're going to be able to follow the books of Kings. Can you see it here? 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 25. See if you can follow this verse. 1 Kings 15, 25. Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, that's up in the north, began to reign over Israel, right, up in the north, in the second year of Asa, the good king, down south in Judah. So the author's trying to say, I'm taking you back up north. Here, good stuff was happening down here in the south. I want you to see what was happening here up in the north with the son of Jeroboam. Remember, Jeroboam is already been told. He's died now, but he was told before he died, your entire line is going to be exterminated because of your disobedience to the word of the Lord. And you think, well, how's his son going to fare? We're not too optimistic, right? 1 Kings 15, verse 26. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the way of his father. And there's the key. The northern kings aren't going to be compared to David down in the south. They don't have a connection to David. They're going to be compared with Jeroboam. Do they walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the golden calf guy? And his son walks right in his same ways, leads the people to sin against the Lord. And you know what happens? A guy named Baasha or Baasha. By the way, if you don't know how to pronounce the names, you just got to act confident and go for it. So Baasha conspires to overthrow the king, the son of Jeroboam, kills him, and as soon as he comes to power, do you know what he does? He hunts down every single person in Jeroboam's family and exterminates them all, according to the word of the Lord that God had spoken through his prophet Ahijah. And you think, well, okay, well, this guy Baasha, that seems pretty violent, but maybe he'll at least learn, don't go the path of Jeroboam, right? But 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 34, this new guy, new dynasty under Baasha, did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And notice, he walked in the way of Jeroboam. The first dynasty has come and gone just like that. The second dynasty has begun under Baasha, and the author wants you to see this guy walked in the very same path of Jeroboam, the first king in the north. And so then what do you think is going to happen? God speaks through a prophet, says to Baasha, you're going down. Your kingdom is going down. Your family is going to be completely destroyed. And so what happens? Conspiracy led by a guy named Zimri. He conspires to overthrow the king, destroys the king. Then as soon as he sits on the throne, he finds every descendant from Baasha's line and wipes out them all. All of the men are killed according to the word of the Lord. And so now you're done with the second dynasty up in the north. And this dude, Zimri, is sitting on the throne. And the author actually tells you, and he reigned for a whole 7 days. But if you read it carefully, it says, and he walked, amazingly, in the sins of Jeroboam for 7 days. And so then a new guy comes up and does the conspiracy and overthrows Zimri. I get these guys confused. Zimri, and destroys him. And now you have, the point is, you got the third dynasty in the north has come and gone in just a matter of a few verses. Dynasties are rising and falling in the north, and it's to help you think this is completely different than what's happening down in the south. But it's not because the southern kings are good. It's because of David. It's because of God's faithful covenant love to David. It's because of his promises that what's happening up in the north, dynasties coming and going, that it's not happening in the south. And so now we are still up here in the north. We're on the fourth dynasty. This guy named Omri is on the throne as the leader of the fourth dynasty in the north. And what do you think he's going to do? In whose ways do you think he's going to walk? The author always wants to tell you, and he walked in the ways of Jeroboam, the first king of the north, because I'll let you in on the secret. Every single king in the north walks in the ways of Jeroboam. Not one of them will ever walk in the ways of David. They all walk in the ways of Jeroboam. But this guy, Omri, seems to be even worse. That's what the text says about him. He's even worse than those who came before him. But he's not nearly as worse as the next guy, right? Not nearly as bad as the next guy, as his son. Because his son's going to outdo all of them in being bad. 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 29, we find the son of Omri named Ahab begins to reign in Israel up in the north. And he's going to reign for 22 years. And that's going to be a lot longer than these guys who've been coming and going. But it's not just that. The story, the world, the narrative world, like the story world, is going to come to a halt and slow down for the life of Ahab. Why? What is it about Ahab that the author wants you to see? This guy's up in the north. And look at what it says, 1 Kings 16, verse 30. And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord. Surprise, surprise. More than all who were before him. And here's the key, verse 31. And as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, he takes a wife, Jezebel, from the Sidonians, a foreign kingdom, and Ahab goes and serves Baal, this foreign god. And he doesn't just serve Baal, he actually erects an altar for Baal in the house of Baal that he builds right in the capital city of the north. See, Ahab, the king in the north, is now actually building a house of worship for a foreign god, for the god of his wife Jezebel, and he's worshiping and he's leading Israel to worship other gods. Verse 33, Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. This guy is the worst of the worst. He's on the throne and he's going to reign for a long time, and he's going to lead the people of Israel, the northern kingdom, to become officially an idolatrous nation, just like the nations that God kicked out of the land before them. And then we think God has made promises about what he's going to do to his people if they do this kind of thing. And so it's very interesting that the author ends 1 Kings 16 by telling you something that we've forgotten about, that hasn't been mentioned for a long time, that happened a couple hundred years before. Do you remember what happened in Jericho? After the destruction of Jericho, this is when they very first went into the land. Right? God laid out a curse on Jericho, on anyone who would attempt to rebuild Jericho. It would cost them their firstborn son to lay its foundations. And it would cost them another son, I think it said, to build it. And you end 1 Kings 16, verses 34, actually it's just one verse. It says, in the days of Ahab, this guy Hiel built Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of his firstborn, and he set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke hundreds of years before by Joshua, the son of Nun. It doesn't matter if it takes hundreds of years. God will do everything that he says, because he never forgets anything that he said. And if the words of Joshua will come to pass, if the curse of Joshua will fall on a man hundreds of years later for rebuilding Jericho, I wonder if we're supposed to think, or wonder if we should just start to ponder, I wonder if the curses laid out by Moses hundreds of years before will come to pass on Israel when they do the very things that God said, if you do that, the curses will fall and you're going to be kicked out of the land for what you've done. But then we have to think, is God going to do anything about it now? Here you've got Ahab on the throne. He's worse than everybody who's come before him. The author wants you to see that. I wonder if God's just going to let his people go, or I wonder if God's going to send somebody to speak for him. And you look at 1 Kings chapter 17, and we find out, we meet a guy we've never heard of before named Elijah. And Elijah might be just the kind of man we're looking for, but he's not a king. As the kingship is falling, maybe God's about to raise up the prophets, the prophetic voice, to speak to the nation as they're pursuing headlong towards destruction.